The Brigade Sustainment Rehearsal is the event where key sustainment actions are practiced, shared understanding is developed, and logistics and the medical plan is validated. A good sustainment rehearsal demonstrates that the sustainment plan is synchronized with the tactical operation and that the logistics tenets of anticipation, integration, continuity, responsiveness, and improvisation are reflected on the battlefield. FM 390.6 states that the Brigade Combat Team Sustainment Rehearsal ensures the synchronization of sustainment efforts before, during, and after combat operations. It also validates the who, what, when, where, and how of support. The sustainment rehearsal usually occurs after the combined arms rehearsal and should not last more than 90 minutes. Oftentimes, the Goldminer Team has observed sustainment rehearsals that turn into a war game, a work group, or a log sync meeting. The sustainment rehearsal is where key sustainment actions are rehearsed and allows participants to translate the tactical plan into visual impressions that leave a lasting mental picture of the sequence of key sustainment actions. The Brigade S-4 and the Support Operations Officer must collaborate within their sections to ensure the rehearsal is organized and roles and responsibilities are clearly defined. The purpose of this video is to provide a look at both what current Army doctrine tells us about the sustainment rehearsal, as well as some of the best practices that have been observed from the field. Over the course of this video, we will talk about recommended attendees, what each briefer typically covers during their portion, best practices and common issues from the past, as well as doctrinal references. While we believe the entire video is valuable, if you only have a few minutes to watch, you can simply jump to the timestamp in this video to see the portion that applies directly to your current position. General Dwight Eisenhower once said that unrehearsed plans are like brand new boots. You can use them, but you won't go far. While this applies to all types of rehearsals, it certainly does for the sustainment rehearsal. Often neglected, forgotten, or rushed through, the sustainment rehearsal is a must for organizations that truly want to understand the battlefield and how best to achieve the commander's desired end state. Key components include allowing participants to visualize the tactical plan and the many actions required for execution in time and space. All must leave understanding how sustainment actions are nested with operational maneuver events, necessary triggers, and an updated synchronization matrix. The following product aims to provide you a better understanding of what the sustainment rehearsal should look like, its key components, participants, inputs, and desired outputs. A special thanks to all participants and those who made it possible. Train the force.
Similarly to the combined arms rehearsal, the sustainment rehearsal requires the participation of brigade leadership and subordinate unit leadership. Each individual that attends the rehearsal should have a speaking role, and they should strive to replicate their actions as close to real life as possible. Use of the terrain model, such as the speakers standing in an accurate location, discussing their actions in relation to the tactical operation, provide a visual understanding of the operation. The terrain model is not simply a podium to speak. Move to the correct location so that the execution can be visualized, seeing the terrain and adjacent units. The Brigade Executive Officer, as the officer responsible for the synchronization of the brigade staff and logistics, leads the rehearsal with assistance from the Brigade Support Battalion Commander and the Support Operations Officer. The Brigade Executive Officer should begin by conducting a roll call and discussing the ground rules for how the rehearsal will be conducted. The rehearsal could be conducted by task force, by phase, by event, or some other framework depending on the focus and time available. The National Training Center scenario lends to executing the rehearsal by phase with focus on specific triggers or critical events on the brigade's execution checklist, or X-check. Following the Brigade XO, opening remarks are typically given by the Brigade Commander and the Brigade Support Battalion Commander. These commanders cover their intent, key tasks, and desired end state. Lastly, they provide their priorities of support and priority of maintenance before transitioning to the next speaker. It is important to remember that in cases where the sustainment rehearsal is conducted immediately following the combined arms rehearsal, often referred to as the CAR, the audience has recently heard the commander's intent, key tasks, and the desired end state. It may be important to focus this discussion on sustainment tasks and how they support the tactical tasks from the CAR. The Brigade S3 or a captain from the Brigade S3 shop will provide an orientation to the terrain model, including key terrain, objectives, phase lines, routes, and the task organization and concept of the operation of the phases that will be rehearsed as well. The Brigade S2 briefs the enemy composition, disposition, and most likely and most dangerous courses of action. Again, it's important to focus on the assessment of enemy actions on the sustainment forces. The status of supply routes, weather, and light data are also important to the sustainment rehearsal. Throughout the sustainment rehearsal, the Brigade S2 will need to stay focused and engaged in the discussion. The S2's understanding of the enemy's most likely and most dangerous courses of action will enable them to look for friendly actions that the enemy would be looking for. Injecting relevant enemy actions will ensure the sustainment plan has the flexibility necessary to ensure the sustainment actions do not cause the maneuver to lose momentum or culminate. At the end of each rehearsal phase, it is recommended to have the Brigade XO present a series of vignettes or critical events to ensure the formation is prepared to react to events that could cause significant disruption to the execution of a plan. A best practice is to select 2 or 3 vignettes well before the rehearsal and notify the Battalion XOs of the challenge that will be presented to them during the execution of the rehearsal. This provides them the time to develop a branch plan to solve the tactical problem beforehand, make any necessary coordination, and ensures that the rehearsal does not get bogged down trying to solve a new problem in a large group setting. Some vignettes that the Goldminers suggest are mass cal during a breach, recovery of CAV equipment, unscheduled Class 5 resupply for a fires battalion, emergency AMR to be executed by aviation, and seaborne contamination of a unit. This list is not all-inclusive, but provides a starting point to check battalion understanding of how critical tasks should be dealt with. As described on FM 3-90.6, the Brigade Logistics Staff Officer, the S-4, develops the sustainment plan, coordinates with the rest of the staff, and the sustainment enterprise as a whole. This will allow a shared understanding at echelon and builds relationships across the warfighting functions. The Brigade S-4 describes in detail the priority of support within the brigade for the following functions: movement, supplies, ration cycle, and maintenance by combat platform. It is also important to highlight any task organization changes and validate the support relationship within the brigade to include enablers. In addition, discuss the system and process for logstat submission, including the point of contact, time suspense, and pace plan according to your standard operating procedures. The Brigade S-4 discusses the battle loss reconstitution process and must include actions at echelon. For example, review how the equipment is recovered from the point of battle loss and the procedures maintenance managers take to prepare the necessary paperwork for the S-4 and the PBO. Units must provide emphasis on battle loss packet submission to maintain constant regeneration of combat power. Properly completed DA 2404, DA 3559, the loss report, and DA 2765-1 or the DA 3161. A good tactic, technique, and procedure is to have forms pre-filled out. This allows expediting the process. At this point in the rehearsal, participants should have a good understanding of the area of operations, key terrain, routes, and enemy actions specific to sustainment operations. If the terrain model overview and descriptions of enemy most likely and most dangerous courses of action are not addressing sustainment-specific concerns, then the sustainment leaders will be forced to extrapolate their concerns from a maneuver perspective, just like they already did during the CAR. Enemy scenarios can be incorporated into the vignettes, or they can purely focus on sustainment operations. At the completion of each vignette, each battalion and BSB element should have an understanding of how these challenging events will be handled. They serve as branch plans or contingency plans that can be executed with minimal planning. If the vignette cannot be resolved during the rehearsal, then the support operations team can take down the vignette to solve through MDMP at a later time. At this point in the rehearsal, each Battalion S-4 must be confident in how to process and submit battle loss reconstitution packets and submit log stats on each platform in the PACE plan. The audience at this point understands the scheme of maneuver, what is being supported, the enemy implications on the sustainment plan, and the priorities of support through each phase.
As prescribed in Army Training Publication 4-90, the role of the Brigade Support Battalion is to plan, coordinate, synchronize, and execute replenishment operations in support of brigade operations. It distributes multi-class logistics support, provides food service, and Roles 1 and 2 Army Health Service support, as well as field maintenance and recovery. It maintains visibility of the distribution network within their area of operations, synchronizing the flow of throughput into the brigade's operational area. The SPO is the principal staff officer responsible for synchronizing BSB distribution operations for all units assigned or attached to the brigade. The SPO is responsible for applying the BSB capabilities against the brigade's requirements. While the Brigade S-4 is the logistics planner for the brigade focusing on long-range planning, the SPO executes the plan, interfaces between supported units, and coordinates with the Sustainment Brigade. The SPO covers the brigade support area, forward logistics element, and any logistics resupply point locations capturing their composition, disposition, reporting requirements, and the sustainment pace plan by phase. The sustainment pace plan must be different from the brigade pace because sustainment units are authorized different systems. However, it should include all of the systems that the sustainment enterprise has access to. The SPO uses these systems to routinely submit their distribution synchronization matrix to the Brigade S3 for publication as a fighting product, operationalizing sustainment at echelon. The SPO also briefs the distribution method in detail: who is getting what, when, where, and how. Consider that every battalion has unique requirements driven by their doctrinal tactical tasks that affect how they need to receive replenishment, and their support should be tailored with those conditions in mind. For example, the cavalry squadron is not able to receive or consume hot chow while screening, and their lines of communications are extended throughout the brigade's area of operations. This presents a dilemma for sustainment support, and it merits a deep dive. The Supply and Services Officer in charge covers the ration cycle, field feeding plan, Class 3B, and PL distribution plan. Class 4 distribution plan, the BSB's capacity for these commodities, anticipated consumption rates, and expected shortfalls. The SNS officer should discuss how many battalions they can replenish before requiring a resupply, and translate that into days of supply based on their anticipated consumption rates. The Goldminers observe that the Class 4 distribution plan should be created in conjunction with the brigade engineer or a representative from the BEB. They are responsible for developing the obstacle plan and should also design the Class 4 CCLs and designate the engineer supply points. The Support Operations Transportation Officer should provide an overview of the BSB's available haul capacity, the transportation movement request process, and any approved TMRs that are in effect for the operation to include approved augmentation to the FSCs. They should also discuss the priority of forward and rearward movement by unit, class of supply, and the movement control requirements to approved log packs moving back to the BSA. This is important to control congestion on the main supply routes, for force protection of those convoys, and to provide visibility for supply point pickups. Note that replacements that need to move forward from the personnel holding area represent an often unanticipated but significant transportation requirement. Their movement needs to be synchronized with log packs. Therefore, the Brigade S1 should coordinate with the transportation officer through the TMR process. The Brigade Ammunition Officer describes the ammunition request process, the controlled supply rates in effect for the operation, and on-hand stock at the ATHP to include special munitions. The BAO should also highlight any shortfalls based on the amount of ammunition that is requested and state that it is a requirement to receive expenditure reports in order for the BSB to clear those requisitions with a supporting ammunition supply point. Note that the Brigade Master Gunner is responsible for developing the required supply rate that the BAO should use to determine if there is a shortfall of munitions. The required supply rate is a product of the wargaming process and is based on the S2's enemy estimate, the weapon systems designed to attrit that enemy, and the tactical task plan for each unit. The SPO MEDO briefs the current and projected combat power for the operation, the Class 7 regeneration plan, controlled exchange, and recovery procedures. The MEDO should specify timelines or conditions for recovery and areas of responsibility delineating between the Bravo BSB and FSC recovery areas. Key to successfully maintaining the maximum combat power possible is the proactive management of non-mission capable fleets by tracking their position on the battlefield via an analog and digital non-mission capable common operating picture, aggressively coordinating recovery efforts, and directing controlled exchange to mitigate supply shortfalls. The Sustainment Automation Support Management Office is responsible for maintaining the VSAT network and will be required to support units on site throughout the operation. The SASMO technician should brief their support request process, the battle drill for replacing a severely damaged VSAT with the brigade's float, and how they will move forward to the supported unit's location. Although the SASMO is not part of the maintenance company, their support should operate in the same way as the maintenance company's specialty shops to avoid confusion. The brigades with the most consistent VSAT connectivity use their SASMO to monitor the brigade's network in real time and proactively dispatch support. The SSA Accountable Officer provides an overview of their pickup and turn-in procedures, hours of operation, and provides a status of the common authorized stockage list to include any critical supply shortages that may affect the operation. This ensures that all participants leave the rehearsal with a common understanding of what supplies are available to support the brigade's readiness and what they will need to cross-level. The SPO has a big job here, setting the stage for the sustainment plan. The audience participated in the Combined Arms Rehearsal and just heard the brigade staff elaborate on how the operation will affect the sustainment community. To get after synchronizing sustainment with the operation, it is uber important the SPO team places icons on the terrain model that can be clearly seen, because what we are doing here is visually confirming the plan and identifying friction. We cannot do that with a briefer holding a piece of paper on the sideline. If the SPO personnel are available, I highly suggest letting each commanding manager brief their part. The SPO can brief the whole thing, sure, but having the managers brief gives the audience a face and a name. They need to own their piece and share that with the audience by standing on the terrain model at the icon they are discussing while stating, "I am, my call sign is, you can reach me by. During this phase I'll be at, my purpose is, the estimated requirements are," and so on. This is not the time to create the plan. This has already been planned out on the logistics synchronization matrix. We are making our final confirmation. The recorder will take notes for any identified changes to update the log sync mat, which will feed fragmentary orders as an outcome. Walking away from this portion of the rehearsal, the audience knows the plan for how sustainment is arrayed across the brigade's area of operation and how sustainment moves from the brigade down to the supported units.
The BSB XO will focus on just the BSB actions. The important thing to note is that this should not simply be a restatement of everything discussed during the Combined Arms Rehearsal. The BSB XO ensures that the triggers to begin displacement of the BSA are nested with the brigade scheme of maneuver so that all the other elements understand what supplies, services, maintenance, and recovery support capabilities will be available at any given time throughout the operation. It is also helpful to discuss the process for gaining entry to the BSA. The gold miners often observe elements from the FSCs or the CSSB not making FM or JBCP contact with the BSA prior to their arrival. Digital or FM link-up dramatically deconflicts getting through the entry control point and reduces the time to execute logpack operations. The Distribution Company Commander describes what actions the BSB Alpha Company will take in each phase to accomplish the Support Operation Officer's distribution plan. The most important things to note are that the triggers and timelines for log packs and supply point displacement to include the fuel and water platoon, SSA, and ATHP. The movement of log packs out of the BSA and into the supported battalion's areas of operations must be synchronized to ensure that the tactical situation will allow the FSC to receive the supplies they need and that the BSB remains postured for replenishment from the CSSB. The displacement of Alpha Company supply nodes creates periods of interrupted service that prevent the upload of log packs, supply point pickups, and the processing of supply requisitions. This makes the timing and sequence of their displacement critical. Prior to displacement, the BSB confirms log packs with the supported FSC and defines what assets provide their supply points with initial operating capability to prioritize their movement during BSA displacement. The Distribution Company Commander also declares the disposition of their forces if they have any attached to a FLE or FSC. The BSB Maintenance Company Commander briefs the execution of the Area Recovery Support Plan, Area Maintenance Support, and the disposition of their assets if any are echeloned forward to a FLE or attached to an FSC. It is important to state the process for requesting and launching recovery assets and for leveraging the armament, ground support equipment, computer and electronics, and missile shops. The maintenance company's services and recovery section has the capability to enable the brigade with recovery of non-mission capable vehicles as the brigade advances. And the specialty shops push teams forward to conduct repairs or provide expertise to minimize as much disruption of the FSC as possible. Note that personnel moving forward to support an FSC should be pushed by BSB convoys. Requiring the FSCs to break contact from the battalion fight to pick up soldiers from the BSA disrupts the distribution synchronization matrix by consuming the FSC's limited transportation assets and makes it likely that the required support will not occur. After the BSB XO, Alpha and Bravo company commanders brief, everyone has a clear understanding of how the BSB will provide support throughout the phase or phases of the operation. This includes the location of the BSA and triggers for displacement, as well as triggers and timelines for log pack operations to the FSCs. The location, composition, and trigger for any flees, if used, will also be addressed. Any changes to the task organization from the BSB should be discussed, as well as the timing and handover procedures to ensure there are no seams in the transition of forces across the brigade. Additionally, everyone should understand the execution of recovery operations and movement of NMC equipment. Any changes to the plan as a result of the sustainment rehearsal that affect the BSB Commander's decision points should be annotated on the decision support matrix. Lastly, if there are any updates to the published order, the BSB should issue a FRAGO to the base companies.
The battalion or task force XOs will discuss their formation's scheme of maneuver. This discussion does not need to go into great detail, as it was likely discussed in detail during the combined arms rehearsal. Each battalion or task force will emphasize different considerations based on their specific warfighting function.
The Unit S-4 focuses on defining their unit's requirements by briefing their unit's anticipated supply status in the combat and company trains, their unit's estimated consumption based on their logistics running estimate, and their number of qualified company-level evacuation and recovery teams. Typically, a maneuver, fires, or effects captain, the S-4 should focus on using their knowledge of the unit's tactical task, special equipment, and TTPs to describe their requirements to their FSC Commander and the support operations staff. This is important because although logisticians are experts in provisioning support from known requirements, they may struggle to anticipate the specific needs of a unit when they are new to the organization. The Unit S-4 and FSC Commander need to work together closely during planning and execution so that both parties understand the unit's requirements and the FSC's capabilities. The FSC Commander briefs their company's logistics situation, describes how they will satisfy the requirements outlined by the Unit S-4, and adhere to the Brigade's concept of support. The FSC Commander should open their brief by stating their company's disposition between the FTCP, CTCP, MCP, and identifying any assets they plan to attach to the supported maneuver companies. Next, they should specify their capacity and define their estimated operational reach in terms of distance and days of supply. This information ensures that the FSC Commander and SPO have the same situational understanding and confirms the SPO's running estimate for that unit. Once the FSC situation is defined, the Commander describes their planned support activities to include their method of timing of distribution, when they will be postured to receive supplies from the BSB, and where they do or don't expect to perform recovery. The FSC Commander should conclude their brief by defining their shortfalls and requesting support from the BSB to mitigate them. The two most important things that an FSC Commander can achieve during the sustainment rehearsal are ensuring that their shortfalls and the risk associated with them are understood, and that the timing of log packs to and from the FSC are synchronized. The unit maintenance technician should state the operational readiness rate for critical fleets that they anticipate their supported unit will begin the operation with. In addition, they should highlight their VSAT status and any serious challenges that will prevent them from returning key equipment to fully mission-capable status before the operation commences. This information clearly articulates the supported unit's available combat power and will illuminate any friction between the available fleet and the expectations outlined in the combined arms rehearsal. In order to provide their commander with extended operational reach and prolonged endurance, Unit S-4s, in conjunction with their FSC commanders, must complete their homework prior to arriving at the brigade sustainment rehearsal. As mentioned, the FSC Commander will provide their task, purpose, capabilities, and requirements. To accurately understand their requirements and any possible shortfalls, the S-4 and FSC Commander must determine and manage their running estimates based upon their mission. This will enable them to provide the so what at the sustainment rehearsal. Units at the NTC often brief their capabilities during the rehearsal, but they have not done their homework or developed running estimates, so they cannot accurately depict the so what of their capabilities. For example, if the unit develops their running estimates, they should be able to brief, our battalion has this amount of fuel, we anticipate consuming this number of gallons during this phase, therefore we require this number of gallons that we have coordinated to receive from the BSB at this time at this location. This is an example of a unit that anticipates a shortfall, but what is just as meaningful to brief is if the unit anticipates a surplus of any commodities. This will enable the SPO to redirect commodities from the unit with a surplus to a neighboring unit that is a higher priority of support, which improves responsiveness to the unit in need. Once the unit has briefed their portion, the audience should have an accurate understanding of the unit's requirements, location, and composition of their sustainment nodes and adjust the brigade's logistics synchronization matrix as necessary. Upon conclusion of the brigade sustainment rehearsal, each unit should walk away with a clear understanding of the commander's intent, the brigade's concept of support, and a copy of the brigade synchronization matrix.
The Brigade S1 will first brief the total casualty estimate, broken down by KIA, urgent, priority, and routine. They will brief how many company-level evacuation and recovery teams are in the brigade, as well as their task and purpose during the operation. The S1 will then brief the PHA location, followed by the S1 casualty reporting requirements and procedures. They should specifically focus on the flow of casualty packets and the casualty reconstitution process. Finally, the S1 must brief when the daily per-stats are due, as well as a per-stat pace plan. The Brigade Surgeon will brief the medical concept of support, to include priority of support with priorities for air and ground medevac based on lines of communications and casualty estimates, and the evacuation pace plan. They will brief the AXP scheme to include grid locations, triggers for opening and closing each AXP, and air corridors supporting AXP conversions to HLZs. The Brigade Surgeon will brief any direct support assets from the BSMC attached to maneuver units, highlighting the command relationship between the maneuver unit and BSMC Commander. They must also include the plan for delegation of medical mission approval authority for air medevac if the Brigade Surgeon cell is unable to communicate. They will also brief if the medical community has support from echelons above brigade. Finally, the Brigade Surgeon will brief the timeline and method of publishing the MedCop, when medical sit reps are due, the medical communications pace plan, and provide a hard copy of the current MedCop to all medical elements. The SPO MEDLOG will brief the scheme of Class 8 resupply, using an example of a line medic sending a resupply request to the Roll 1, and then the Roll 1 requesting Class 8 from the Brigade Medical Supply Office, and provide all medical elements a copy of available push packs and or the Class 8 request template. The SPO MEDLOG will brief the BMSO's Class 8 request pace plan, as well as the anticipated methods of Class 8 distribution during this phase. They must brief the priority of Class 8 resupply by unit and type, notably the availability of blood, plasma, or any other Class 8 that requires cold chain storage.
The Brigade's medical concept of support is integral to the Brigade's overall combat success at the National Training Center. This planning and synchronization, therefore, is vital to those outside the medical community. To facilitate shared understanding, the Brigade's medical combat operating picture needs to be disseminated daily to all first sergeants and platoon sergeants, enabling a coordinated casualty evacuation plan and execution while enforcing the doctrinal medical area support requirements. Likewise, planning and rehearsing through every vehicle is a CASEVAC vehicle, while simultaneously allocating dedicated CASEVAC platforms in support of battalion and brigade operations enables a smooth casualty evacuation architecture. Non-medical leadership enforcing these functions can significantly reduce their die to wounds rate.
The Charlie Med Commander will brief the Roll 2 location and capabilities, especially if they are less than fully capable. They must brief their triggers to jump, anticipated downtimes for jumping, and the plan for any Roll 2 blackouts. They must brief any additional details that may be needed for the AXPs, specifically AXP frequencies, evacuation platoon call signs, and if they are manned, unmanned, or using a shuttle system. Battalion MEDOs will brief all locations pertinent to their operation, specifically fast and mass locations. Use terrain features and checkpoints along with the grid location to create a shared understanding. If a Roll 1 jumps during the phase, ensure a new location is identified, as well as what will trigger the jump. Brief alternate locations in the event the site is not accessible, unsuitable, or enemy activity forces relocation. Brief each Roll 1's capability, specifically split operations, patient decontamination, litter load capacity, and the battalion CASEVAC assets and personnel. The battalion MEDOs also brief the casualty estimates, and if the casualty estimate indicates a mass cal, and brief if the Roll 1 has the capability to handle it or if external support will be required. Finally, a battalion MEDO and the Charlie Med Commander will brief a walkthrough of receiving a casualty on the forward line of own troops, conducting CASEVAC operations to the Roll 1, and then medevacing the casualty to the Roll 2 to ensure shared understanding across the brigade. Following the medical evacuation plan, the SPO Mortuary Affairs NCOIC briefs the evacuation process for human remains in accordance with Joint Publication 4-06, Mortuary Affairs, and FM 4-20-64, Mortuary Affairs Operations. This brief should include guidance for handling storage and transportation of remains. Identify the point at which casualties are declared deceased and the location of the Mortuary Affairs collection point. If the Brigade S1 doesn't cover it, this briefing should also include the task and purpose for search and recovery teams, specify who will lead these teams in the search and recovery of remains. I can't emphasize enough how important casualty estimates are in the Brigade's personnel and medical planning. Determining the flow of casualty evacuation from the battlefield coupled with the personnel flow to replace those losses has to be synchronized with combat operations. These estimates are a critical part of developing the plan and ultimately the synchronization of the Brigade's 8 organic medical functions. We need to highlight the friction points where casualty estimates exceed our capabilities to treat or evacuate, starting at the lowest level casualty collection point through the Roll 2. Triage becomes critical. From these friction points, the Brigade Surgeon section must then clearly define the Brigade's medical priority of support, which is further refined by updated capabilities and limitations of the subordinate medical elements against the current operational environment. Prior to the Brigade's sustainment rehearsal, each unit needs to receive the Brigade's current medical common operating picture. The medical common operating picture provides a snapshot of how the Brigade's medical nodes are currently arrayed on the battlefield at the start of the sustainment rehearsal. During the sustainment rehearsal, each echelon of care needs to be able to talk in detail their capabilities, locations, and friction points while standing on the train model. We need to show our synchronization and crosstalk to be able to rehearse actions on to prevent delay in care. Leaving the sustainment rehearsal, the Brigade Surgeon section, SPO Medical section, and Brigade Support Medical Company leadership have verified the battalion's requirements, locations, and compositions of their medical nodes, and adjusted the medical concept of support as necessary. Additionally, units need to walk away with a clear understanding of the Brigade's medical concept of support to include understanding locations and capabilities of adjacent medical elements, which can provide area support. Our soldiers are depending on our planning to preserve life.
The Division Sustainment Support Battalion, DSSB, is an echelon above Brigade Sustainment Battalion that serves in a general support role to an entire division and is task organized under a sustainment brigade. Therefore, it will not take taskings directly from the BSB or brigade. However, it is advantageous for the DSSB to remain situationally aware of the BSB's and brigade's operation because they are the requirements owners from whom the DSSB's support missions originate. The best method for the DSSB to gain this situational awareness at the outset of an operation is to attend the Brigade's sustainment rehearsal. The DSSB can garner best awareness for themselves and the supported unit by having a briefing role in the rehearsal. The DSSB's briefer can be the SPO or Battalion S-3. At a minimum, the brief should include the DSSB's current location, any projected DSA displacements, and the anticipated lines of communication that the DSSB will utilize to push sustainment to the BSA. Additionally, the DSSB can brief their capabilities with a focus on specialty capabilities the BSB and Brigade would want to know they can tap into upon request. For example, if a DSSB has a heavy equipment transport company assigned, that is valuable information for an ABCT to understand. Finally, the DSSB can brief already forecast and tasked resupply missions during the phase of the operation that the Brigade is rehearsing to provide the BSB anticipated DSSB resupply arrival times in the event these arrival times conflict with BSB resupply and LRP operations. The units can discuss potential friction points and mitigation techniques. If necessary, the DSSB can go back to the Sustainment Brigade with these friction points and mitigations for adjudication, with conflicting Sustainment Brigade missions, priorities, and potential retasking. During the DSSB portion of the rehearsal, the audience was informed on where the division support area is located within the Brigade's area of operation, the DSSB's distribution, lift, and specialty capabilities, and how to request their use. Their current and projected locations are represented on the terrain model with physical markers, fostering visual understanding. The major planning product the DSSB uses as an input to the sustainment rehearsal and updates as an output is the Logistics Synchronization Matrix. It is important that this product is easily disseminated to the BSB given the dispersion of the two units. As previously stated, any document that requires a plotter to print is not sustainable in a field environment. Leave this styled for detailed garrison planning or as a tool in the SPO shop. At this point, the audience has a clear understanding of how commodities will flow into the Brigade's area of operations.
When it comes to concluding your sustainment rehearsal, units have a myriad of options. We would recommend that units take this opportunity to hear closing comments from the senior leader in attendance. In a perfect world, that would be your BCT Commander. In the absence of the Brigade Commander, perhaps the Brigade Command Sergeant Major is present and can provide some wisdom. If not, the BSB Commander, the SPO, the Brigade XO, or even the Brigade S-3 are ideal persons to provide some closing comments. If there are any clarifying questions that remain, keep in mind hopefully there was a lot of discussion generated from the rehearsal itself. This is the unit's last opportunity to put those questions to bed. The Sustainment Synchronization Matrix will likely see updates or changes from the discussion and will need to be distributed quickly after the conclusion of the rehearsal. The gold miners often see closing comments focus on the accuracy and timeliness of logstat reporting, the importance of 5988 echoes being turned in on time, and the importance of units submitting expenditure reports to accompany their ammunition resupply request, just to name a few. We hope this video will assist you and your unit as you prepare for either your rotation here at the National Training Center, or for large-scale combat operations, or the entire spectrum of operations that you might be deployed to. From the Goldminer Team and the National Training Center, thank you. Train the force.